This episode is brought to you by Instant Impact. Instant Impact provides transformative talent solutions to small and mid-sized companies that are making between 30 and 500 hires each year. If your recruitment's giving you a headache and you don't know where to start, then give the team at Instant Impact a call or visit www.instant-impact.com for more information. Hello and welcome to We Need to Talk About HR. I'm your host, Felix Mitchell. AI, as we talk about every week, it seems, is changing so much. But there's been a lot in the press at the moment around the impact it's having for the bottom rung of the career ladder. In a lot of cases, it kind of feels like it's disappearing. Those junior roles that once taught us how to work, how to write a brief, how to analyze data, let alone navigate office politics, it feels like it's being automated away, and you're seeing huge cutbacks in early career programs from the largest employers. And that's happening in the UK, in the US, and really all over the world. So are we creating a generation here that's jumping straight from school or university to almost mid-level responsibilities without learning the fundamentals? What does this mean for people in the sort of apprenticeship phase of their career? I don't think anyone's really talking about how we build career pathways right at the beginning of people's careers when there aren't those junior level responsibilities to start with. And that's what we're going to talk about today. My guest is Goula Charalambous, and she has been in the world of HR for decades. And this has been a real focus throughout her career. Goula, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Felix.
I think this has been a real focus of yours for ages, way before AI. Can we just start with why you think it's so important to focus on hiring for potential rather than necessarily experience?
Well, I think primarily with junior roles, when you're recruiting, of course, you're looking at their potential, because the plan is to retain them and to develop them into great leaders. You know, that sounds a little bit of a cliche, but that's actually the truth. But unfortunately, your point about AI, you do have to really think about being authentic and effective. And unfortunately, when people are coming out of uni, coming out of school, and they're generating job description, job sort of CVs and stuff like that by using AI, you're losing something. I think you're losing the actual personality of the individual. You're just not being able to understand that person correctly. And I think a lot of what we do in HR in terms of particularly talent acquisition, it's instinct, you know, and you get a feel for a person. And in my experience in the past, I've interviewed some people where hiring managers have not really wanted to give them an opportunity, but your instinct tells you that there's something there. And I've done that, and I've made a case, and we've taken people on, and it's worked. You know, they've thrived and become great managers and great leaders, and some to go on to have their own businesses, you know. So, but I do think you lose that with AI, and it's a really big talking point at the moment in terms of the future and what is it going to look like. And it's a tough one, but I think because it generates the kind of things that employers are looking for in terms of a CV, that's great. But when you interview people and you spend a lot of time talking to them, they can't back up what they've put in their CV because it's not real. You know, it's not really about them. It's what they think you want to read. So that's the challenge.
Yeah, and I think it's always been the case. I've always kind of questioned how good a CV is for, I guess, understanding the person themselves. But I mean, we're also at a time, you know, there's all of this AIs coming at the same time as there's been so much pressure on HR and TA teams. I think in a lot of companies, they've been cut right down to the to the bone, feels like everyone's unbelievably stretched as it is. How can we make sure that we make time for more in-person interactions so that we, or sorry, jumping straight to a conclusion there, but how can we make sure that we take enough time to give candidates the opportunity to show their true selves and show what makes them special?
I think really sort of HR's primary role in the implementation of AI is to foster ethical and responsible usage. That's our primary concern. But for me, it's communication. Looking at job descriptions, you have to be very clear. And of course, that's one area of HR where people are using AI. But you have to be authentic. You have to talk to people. You have to understand what it is they're doing, what it is they want out of a role, and if their skills and competencies fit and what you're looking for. But I think the emphasis has to be not forgetting our role as HR leaders to guide the organisation and employees effectively in learning for the future and navigating through this. It's important to emphasise the unique value that employees bring to the role. And, AI does result in displacement or loss, and we'll have to commit to transition pathways to be able to do that. Does that answer your question? Is that?
Yeah, it does. I guess there's two parts to the question, which I know you're not supposed to do as an interviewer. So my bad. So definitely one of them. I think the other is, it's just a question of timing. Cause I think before you were talking about the time to sit down with candidates, understand not just what they've done, but what makes them tick, and create space for that gut feel, which, as you say, and I really agree, there is an importance for that instinct of whether someone's going to thrive within your organization, particularly for a sort of smaller organization. Ultimately, you want to figure out, you're going to end up sitting next to this person for the next 5-10 years. You want to make sure there's someone that you'll enjoy working with and that they'll enjoy working with you, right? How do you create time to have those? And I think for me, it feels like they're in-person interactions with candidates. How do you make sure that in an HR team or a recruitment team that you have time to have those meetings? Is it just a question of prioritization?
I think it has to be a question of prioritization, especially when you're talking about time. And I think when you're recruiting people into an organization, you have to prioritize, you have to make that time. I wouldn't suggest that AI has kind of taken over that. For me, my talent acquisition team, they spend a hell of a lot of time talking to hiring managers before to make sure they understand what they're recruiting, why they're recruiting, and what the job is going to be, and what they're looking for. And in reality, sometimes they don't know what they're looking for. So it's really key to understand that from the offset. And then the TA guys, they pull a group of people that they think will fit, and then they put them in front of the hiring manager. Now, some hiring managers are very keen. They're very excited about recruiting new people, and that's how it should be. If you're going to get it right. So you do have to prioritize the time, but you have to also add value to that process. It's not you're not churning them in and out, and you really have to treat people with respect and dignity. And I do think that recruiters these days do dictate the market to an extent. And but from an organization perspective who recruit internally, I think they have more control over that process. So yeah, be authentic, prioritize the time, and take them through what's in it for them, and what they're going to achieve by working for an organization. And authentic, for me, being authentic is the absolute key. Don't fill their heads with promises that you're not going to deliver, So yeah, so that for me, you have to prioritize and make time to go through that process. And at the moment, it's still something that's so important to have that interaction to be able to achieve the best results.
No, I really agree. So you got them in the organization. What are the steps and I guess processes and systems that a business can set up to make sure that you're helping juniors to make the most of to sort of fulfill their potential? I mean, again, particularly where AI is coming in and doing quite a lot of the work that they used to train on.
Let's face it, with everything, HR systems these days, there's an awful lot of AI.
Mm.
And, you know, you're going to put them in front of that probably within the first couple of days. So you take them through an induction program, you introduce them to all of your systems, and you basically old-fashioned training and just talk to them about it, show them what they can do. Actually, from a compliance perspective, all organisations have to take them through that as well to make sure that they sign up and that we're all doing the right thing. But there's an awful lot of AI in compliance now, probably not as much, but there is. And that also generates a vehicle for new starters to understand what the expectations are of the business. So I would say, you know, the good old fashioned induction, that's not necessarily someone standing at the front of a classroom and
Not on it with a
talking to
blackboard.
them. Yeah, exactly. I'm not talking about those days. They're gone, thankfully. But just to sort of assign proficiency levels, and that you would use AI for, and just sort of generate a real worthwhile induction for them so that they understand what the business is about, what the history is, where they're going in the future, and um, just make sure that they understand what they're sort of coming into as a new starter of a business. But I would also sort of encourage the 30 to 90-day plan. You know, that may be that sounds old fashioned in itself, I would say, but nevertheless,
I've been
people
I've
need
been
to know
writing
where
some
they're going.
myself. I've been
Have
writing some
you?
myself this
Oh, that's
week.
good
Yeah,
to
yeah.
hear. but you kind of have to take responsibility right from the off to get this person to where they need to be within the first 3, 6, 9 months, you know. And can AI replace doing that? I don't think so. And you know, and I'm a big fan, but I would say 54% of CEOs are against AI. So
Is that right?
it's yeah, that's a McKinsey stat. So, you know, I think you're not necessarily going to bombard them, but at the same time, I think some of the old-fashioned principles really do apply, and we haven't lost that human interaction altogether, not yet, anyway.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and it's funny. Whenever it comes to the podcast, I think one of the things that's really lucky is they always coincide with things that are going on in my life. Yeah, I'm literally literally building these. I wonder if I plan it that way, but I'm literally doing these 90 day plans for a couple of really pivotal new hires that we're looking for. And one of the things that struck me as you were talking is very little of what I've been doing has been, and you know me, I couldn't be more excited about AI, but the things that I've identified as the key, well, for us anyway, is the key differentiators between whether they'll be successful or not.
Mm,
It's all the human stuff.
I
It's
think so.
all, you know, making sure they're building the right relationships, that they're understanding about us, our solution, that they're sitting with some clients, those sorts of things. Uh, I wonder when you look at yours, how much of a weighting do you put on? We've already spoken about I guess the induction around here are our platforms, here are all the rest of it. How important is it to have the human pieces, and how do you think about the more human side of learning about a business?
Well, I think, well, going back to your point earlier on, when you're talking about junior roles in particular, you know, they're terrified when they start a new job. And for some, it might be their first job, even if they've been to uni, you know, and they've had that experience, which is great life experience. They're terrified when they come into a new role. And actually, part of me says they should be, because it shows that they care.
Yeah.
They care. And it's our job, not just in HR, but just generally hiring managers, department managers, and actually senior stakeholders have to show them that they're there, they're present. We have a very much an open door policy. So I think the human interaction is key, and you introduce them to key individuals around the business. I remember, and this is probably going back a very long time, when I first started my career and I left college, I started a program with John Lewis. And when they took you to the top floor to show you where the directors sat, when you got out the lift, everybody whispered. They wouldn't raise their voice. And as they're walking through the corridors, and so sits here and so sits here. And you think, oh my God, those days are gone, thankfully.
Yeah.
So I think introducing them to a CEO, introducing them to senior stakeholders is really important these days. They put a face to the name. They're not just these people that are sitting in ivory towers. And the more of that you do, it embeds them into the business, and they feel comfortable, they feel supported. And that's when I think they thrive. They really understand how important they are to the business. And you just, regular check-ins and stuff like that are really key.
I don't think I'd ever thought of describing new joiners like that before, but you're so right. Juniors coming in, they're scared, and or a lot of them are, and I think that's maybe more true today than it was when I started my career, because I'm having so many calls at the moment with people at that stage in their career before they've got their first job. And it's so hard for them right now. I'm not sure it's ever been this hard for people to get their first gig.
Yeah, and you know better than anyone. You've done that graduate scheme, that graduate recruitment for a long time. So you're more familiar with it probably than I am. But yeah, to get that foot in the door is hard enough in itself these days. Not only at the junior level, at all levels, but to be able to. For me, it's a little bit more like a kind of a mentoring process. And I think you really need to care about it. And they don't, when they come for their first role or even second role, they're not quite sure what they're doing. They don't even know if they really want to be doing that job. You know, they unless you've got that, vocation where I want to be a doctor, I want to be a lawyer, I want to be, if you're not doing those kind of roles and you really think you might want to be a business analyst or something or something like that, you're not quite sure till you get there. So, it's a tough gig, I think.
Goula, what do you do with your managers to make sure that they have this? I can sort of feel through the screen your levels of empathy here, but what do you do? Not everyone's like that, as much as we wish that they would be. What do you do with your managers to make sure that the level of care and empathy that you have is reflected in the way that they deal with juniors?
Well, if I'm honest, sometimes you don't realise that until something's not worked, But I do spend a lot of time with senior stakeholders, and mid-level management for me is the real area where you take your time to mentor them and coach them and make them understand that just this having the right approach and being able to understand an individual when someone comes into a business and they're earning, I don't know, 25 grand. Some of these hiring managers or senior stakeholders, it's been a long time since they've been in that situation. They've forgotten what that's like. So it's really important to spend time with them as part of their performance reviews, perhaps, and as part of their ongoing development, that they understand how they come across. For me, I do a lunch and learn session on personal brand, and personal brand is so important. It's not something people say to me all the time. Do you know what? I never thought about that. I never thought about how I come across and how I, you know, treat people and what they're going to go away and say about me behind my back, or if they go into a room with other people. Oh, yeah, I just met so and so. You know, it's a little bit like that. You know, that people remember the negative, don't they? But they don't always remember the positive.
Yeah, I think there's a stat that you need to do 10 times as much positive to make up for just one negative.
Yeah, and it's a thread that runs through everything. So your response time to people, your response in itself, what does that look like? So when you're preparing managers to take on, for maybe some of them for the first time, have people reporting into them, again, you've got to start that development all over again and make sure they're ready for it. No, I'm not talking just about from a compliance and a legal perspective. I'm talking about from a human perspective. You know, be prepared. And if they've got any, that's when a good HR department comes into play. Because if you're at the end of a phone, at the end of a Teams message or whatever it might be, I'm not sure what I'm doing here. Can you help me? You know, they're not going to know everything. So that kind of personal brand for me is really key for everyone to have that in the back of their mind.
I think that's so cool. I'm not sure I've heard that before ever, but I can see it as you were talking, I can see it coming to life, both for the juniors coming in. You're saying, look, it's so important. You know, first impressions are really important. It's so important how people will be judging, people will be pigeonholing you. They'll be making assumptions about you. Really think about how your brand's building up in the business. And then for the managers as well, if they get a reputation for, I don't know, being really unpleasant to their juniors, that will pervade when those juniors are 3 years into their career and building revenue for the organization. They're not going to want to work for the person that has a reputation for being a bit of a dragon, are they? That's so interesting.
No, I mean, I've not in this business, but in in my previous businesses that I've worked with, I did some consultation for a business and independently when I was working for myself. And I remember the CEO saying to me, I want you to get my leadership team working together and I want them to thrive, and but I want you to beast them. And I said, what are you talking about? You know, and he was ex Royal Navy.
Right.
He spent a lot of time sort of underwater in a submarine for about 6 years. He was telling me, and I want you to beast them. And I did this piece of work, and these guys, although they were senior and at the top of their game, they were terrified of him. And a lot of them didn't have a voice, and that was the problem. They didn't have a voice. So when he asked them a question, they didn't answer him honestly. They just pacified him. So actually, it was very difficult because to be able to get that job done, I kind of had to tell him. I had to tell him it was actually you're the problem. It's not them, it's you, you know. So that's a tough one. But coming back, you know, you really have to be conscious of that and how you treat people. But I would say support communication is absolutely key.
Yeah. And that, I guess it's called psychological safety, isn't it? The ability to be able to make a mistake
contract,
and,
yeah.
And I guess to bring us a bit full loop on this. And you made a point about halfway through saying that, you've obviously it's a very challenging employment market right now. And so whoever's recruiting can kind of treat people however they want. at the minute, that combined with the kind of fear and uncertainty, particularly amongst juniors, when you're looking at the contract that a company has with their new hires, let's focus in on the grads. Do you think that needs to evolve from where it has been? Do you think we need to be thinking a little bit more around stability or agility or mental health? I don't know. What's the deal look like these days?
You've touched on something there, and agility definitely, but mental health as well. You know, that's a real biggie in the workplace these days. And I belong to a HR forum that's run by a lady called Mag Kearns, and the work that she does is really to put the pieces back together again, you know, for HR leaders in particular. But in terms of grads, you've kind of have to think about fitting in, being agile, thinking about what the future looks like, and what's the unique value that they can bring to the roles that you're going to put them into. And you've got to balance the enthusiasm and the practicality of implementing a graduate scheme, for as an example. But kids these days, and I don't mean that in a patronising way,
I'm with you.
They've got an awful lot to think about, you know, and the mental health thing is really important. And it's not a consideration as much as you, from a practical perspective and working with a HR department, you have no idea how common it is that people suffer with mental health. So just that in itself is important in regards to how you treat people, you know, and how you bring them forward.
Is that mental health challenge something you see more at the junior end in the organization, or is it kind of the same throughout?
I do think you see it more at the junior end, and you know, we have mental health first aiders now, as most organisations do, and when you go through that training, you learn the difference between ADHD, people being dyslexic, bipolar, all those kind of different conditions that people unfortunately suffer with, and you have to work around that. You have to navigate around that. And for youngsters, it's hard because they're in a stressful situation where they're embarking on maybe the first or second job that they've ever had. And, you know, it's stressful. It's difficult. And you kind of have to understand where their creativity perhaps and their introduction to the business starts, and where potentially these conditions kick in. So you kind of have to think about that. You try to understand that individuals have these conditions from the off, but we're very restricted. We can't ask direct questions about mental health. But once we've given them a contract and they start with the business, you can then begin to have those conversations. What you mustn't, well, you know this, you know, you mustn't judge them for it, and you mustn't not employ them because they've got a condition, because people manage to have very successful careers around these, you know, health conditions.
Oh, you're looking at a dyslexic over here.
Yeah. So, you know, it has to be part of our workforce. It has to be, you know, D&I, you know, you have to consider all of those things now. And it's really important that people are not judged because of it, but you also need to be able to support them correctly.
Absolutely. And just, yeah, I guess being thoughtful about all of that. So important. Good. I can't believe it. It's all we've got time for. Thank you.
Oh,
thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been a really interesting conversation.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.